Yo, what is up, everybody? It is Fantmx, and I thought I'd jump on here now that the NDA has been released for written and verbal communication for the pre-alpha 2 spot testing of Ashes of Creation. I thought maybe I'd just give you some of my thoughts. We, of course, just had Steven on yesterday. Great interview. It is on YouTube if you want to go watch. And during that interview, we actually were released from our NDA at the time, but not long after, Steven just decided to release it for everyone. So here we are. You've had many, I think, wonderful videos out there. Jamie Chaos, Nice Gaming, some other folks as well for you to take a look at. And I thought I'd throw in my own thoughts. And I don't have a script for this, so we'll see how this goes. Don't know how much editing there will be. But yeah, I think I have a little bit different perspective. I've been obviously in PI for some time now. Can't talk about PI. That is still under NDA, but I can talk a little bit about how spot testing is sort of related to node wars and kind of what you can expect going forward. The first thing I want to say is that I also tend to focus a little bit more on PvE than PvP. Now, I am not against PvP, but I'm kind of a PvP sometimes, or when forced to. I don't necessarily seek it all the time out of my way. So I kind of look at things a little bit differently as well in that perspective. So gosh, where should I start? I think one of the things that is most commonly asked about is the death penalty. My thoughts on the death penalty, right now it feels kind of good, actually. We obviously don't want to die, but you know, the bite to it does seem to work. EXP debt seems pretty fine. Doesn't seem super hard to work off. Now, as that goes up into higher levels, maybe that changes. Actually, one thing I didn't get to ask Steven is it does appear our leveling goes like this. It is not a linear process for gaining experience and thus levels. It is a curve. So if this experience debt is a percentage, does that percentage change as we get into later levels? I don't know. I didn't get to ask him that because I think that would actually have some effect here. But anyways, what we have right now seems to work pretty well. I actually don't really notice having to work it off very much, which I think is a very positive thing. I will say losing materials absolutely sucks. That part hurts a little bit. And so there definitely is some risk reward there. You know, you've been chopping trees for a while, getting some ore for a bit, whatever it might be, you die. And yeah, you know, you lose a chunk of that and you feel it. You definitely feel it. But I think otherwise, you know, stat dipping, I haven't really felt too punishing. Next thing I want to talk about is corruption and specifically ganking. I know there's been this large concern about people ganking everyone. And I do personally think that there will be a small group of people who tend to have their playstyle be, at least part of the time, living in the red as a form of challenge. I have to say, though, really outside of Richie SH, yes, Ricky, we are going to name you. I've really not had anyone try to come at me while I have been harvesting or killing things. I really haven't had much at all of unwanted PvP encounters, which has been really nice. I also want to say corruption seems to be getting pretty good work to it. I'm sure some of you probably watched the Yokai interview with Steven on discussion rounds. And actually at that time, Envious, Yokai NDA, McStackerson were talking about how they thought corruption was punishing. It was in a good spot, almost too punishing. Well, that week, they actually did an upgrade, and patch notes specifically stated 3 different parts of corruption actually got buffed, increased. And so they actually made it much more punishing even after they had this interview. So I don't think you need to worry too much. Now, of course, once the servers open, I think people are going to try to push the boundaries as much as they can. Those first few weekends, probably if you have 100,000 people trying to play, there are going to be some people trying to PK and grief a little bit. That's probably going to happen. But I think long term, things seem to be in a fairly good place. Gosh, where should we go from here? Power gain is a little bit off right now, but that is also something that can be tweaked, I think, pretty easily later on. There are some pretty significant differences in power between levels and also between gear, to a point really where a level 10 It's probably going to have a hard time with a level 15. Maybe that's intended, but when you have 50 levels, I don't know that you would expect so much difference between levels 5, 10, and 15, but it's pretty pronounced right now. But I guess it does feel good when you get more power like that. But I do wonder how that will affect sort of just world play and progression. AI voices are a little bit weird right now. Some of them sound pretty good. And Steven has commented on this, that they're still working on it. But definitely a lot of the AI voices are strange. I appreciate that they're using their own in-house people that are creating this game as sort of the base for the AI. Right now, a lot of it kind of feels very weird, and how you talk to the NPCs, but I'm sure they'll tweak that as things go along, but it's a little off. I love that they're doing it, and I do think that is going to add a lot of flavor to the world once it works. But right now, it's a little weird. I kind of talked a bit about leveling. There is a sort of almost exponential curve. So as you start, you're thrown into Lionhold. You are allowed to pick up any weapon you want. You are starting with sort of a class-specific weapon, but you can go around the room and pick up anything you want. Then you go out, get a quest to get to a townsperson, and along the way you kill some sickly goblins, and really your first 2 to 3, 4 levels go pretty fast. After that, things start to slow down a little bit. Really, once you get to levels 8, 9, and 10, from there things really pronounce a decrease in sort of level gain and speed. This is where I think the 100 hours starts to kick in. You definitely have a much easier sort of first 5 levels as you're getting used to the game. But hopefully that will get tweaked a little bit and made to feel a little bit more balance between the levels. Right now, there's almost a sense of sort of hell levels later on. For those of you who are unfamiliar, EverQuest had hell levels and double hell levels, where the experience gain needed to advance was intentionally higher. Now, this isn't sort of peaks and valleys, but again, the curve is like this. So I think there hopefully can be a little bit evening out of that slope. The classes all feel super good. I think the only negative that I've heard, it isn't really a negative, is that the tank can't really solo very well compared to others. But otherwise, from what I understand, talking to Jamie and some other sort of tank primaries, they've had a lot of fun with it, especially in group settings. They really can hold a lot of aggro and feel pretty effective. I've played essentially all of the classes, and I love them all. Actually, to put in perspective, I still think I will be a cleric main, probably a Templar, which is a cleric fighter. But throughout really most of early spot testing, I was cleric. Node Wars, I was cleric. Once we had access to the Bard, I was Bard. In the spot tests, I've played a lot of fighter, actually. Fighter is fun. I didn't think that would be the case. I am not typically a melee type player. I tend to stand back, although to be fair, I do intend to again play a Templar, so I'll be up there in the front line. But the fighter is a lot of fun. The mage probably still needs a little bit more work. It really was one of the first that we got shown, and I think every other class since has sort of one-upped, and probably the mage needs a little bit more work. But really all of the classes feel pretty good, and the combat also feels pretty good. So I think that is a great starting spot. Interestingly, we look at another game that has sort of had a time frame similar to Pax Dei. They did not focus on combat initially, and look where they're at, versus Ashes of Creation, which really has focused on combat for the last, 5 years, 6 years. Feels good. It really does. Feels good in PvE. It feels good in PvP as well. So I think people are going to be pretty happy with the combat aspects. Server stability. That is going to be the big thing here in phase 1. Of course, that is what they're trying to do in phase 1, is test their server stability. The very first initial tests of the Spot Wars. I just combined two thoughts. The very first spot testing for Pre-Alpha 2 was pretty bad. You did not have a ton of players in. I think we had, we split into groups. So maybe 20, 30, 40 people would go off into a different part of the world, different server worker. And it was bad. It was really bad. A lot of crashing, a lot of rubber banding, just bad. Jamie Chaos and I actually very early on split from everybody just to go kill goblins, just to get off their space. That worked a little bit better. We didn't really have as bad of a lag, but the initial server structure was absolutely terrible. That really mirrors Node Wars as well. Node Wars, again, almost unplayable initially. But in both cases, Intrepid has really good turnover with fixing bugs, fixing problems. And really, at this point, servers are in a much better state. However, I do think they're going to get wrecked come Friday. We'll see. I'm 99.9% sure. There are still some things, even with the players that are in now, which has shrunk, actually. There is not as many pre-alpha 2 testers as you might think. Certainly as I run around, there are people playing, but not as many as you think might be based off the number of all of the Alpha 1 players that have been invited. But even now, when I get into a sort of highly populated area, there can be a little bit of oddities with NPCs, some disappearing, mobs becoming sort of untargetable, and occasionally getting hit from who knows where. There's also this really weird bug once you cross a server boundary where the player probably keeps on playing, but they have a visual representation of the character or their horse sort of stuck at the boundary. And so as you're coming up to it, you see all these players just sort of running in place, or how horses standing there. It's kind of funny. But so there are 100% still some server issues. If you missed the interview yesterday, Steven did say dynamic gridding is not in, and they hope to have it in by phase 2, but it probably will not be in phase 1. I guess technically he said not the first couple of weekends, but I think we can all sort of interpret that to mean phase 2 is probably the target for dynamic gridding. But I do think that servers are going to suffer quite a bit as we move forward. So we'll see. That will be a interesting issue that I think we come across. Of course, they're going the queuing route. Actually, Steven gave a very interesting answer to how their queue systems work. I would encourage you to go back and look at our interview with him. I'm not going to repeat it here, but I think it provides some background and logic as to why they're doing what they're doing, and also probably why they're starting out with such a small number of servers. But 100% that, and I think everyone that I've play tested with will say the same thing. Everyone sort of expects servers to crap out. So I think you should expect a lot of queue times and a lot of crashes back into the queue. They'll open things as they need to, but this is definitely what we're working on right now is server stability. The harvesting, processing, and crafting loops are very, very basic, very basic. I think you've probably seen other people talking, even the animal husbandry or sort of capturing. You walk up to a monster, a mob, whatever, a deer, a wolf, and you press F and it goes into your inventory. That's kind of how basic some of this is. Things are very spread out. You are 100% going to have to be relying on everyone else as well. So really crafting is going to be a grind just as much as the combat, the sort of level progression PvE will be. Hopefully they make it fun. Right now, harvesting feels pretty good. Actually hitting the rocks, watching the trees fall over, that all actually feels pretty good. The inventory system is interesting. I think it's doing its job. You have to make some interesting choices if you're not careful about what you carry and if you have to drop something or not. Actually, my advice to you, one of the very first things you should do when you get into the Alpha 2 testing, get up enough silver to buy some bags. I always buy the lumber and the mining ore bags just for extra space. That's going to save you a lot of headaches. You do have storage initially, but you have to keep in mind storage is separate by node, which is also another interesting quirk that you have to work through. Right now, though, processing, I think, is sort of the a problem right now. I don't know if it's a problem, but it is definitely where everything sort of slows down. Harvesting, you can just go and go and go. Processing, they have changed the time. Initially, to process one thing took a minute. So if you wanted to process 25 pieces of wood, it would take 25 minutes. And there really was only one options were only 1, 5, 10, 1, 5, 10, and I think 25. I'll have to go back and think. You couldn't actually do odd numbers. So if you only had 8 pieces of wood, you couldn't just set it to do 8. You had to do 5, and then you had to do 1, 1, 1. Hopefully they changed that. They did reduce the time, which has been nice. The time to process things was cut in half, which is I think bringing it more in line with what it needs to be. Because as it's been, you would just clearly out harvest what you could process. Now I assume a lot of nodes, a lot of guilds are going to have dedicated processors, dedicated harvesters. So maybe that's not a problem long term, but you are definitely going to, if you have that structure, probably need more processing people than you will need gathering people and harvesting. Crafting is on the other end as well. Now crafting also takes, well, even processing takes a lot of different things from different places depending on what you're processing. It's also not cheap. You make far more money just selling your goods to the vendors, your harvested or gathered stuff. You make far more coin actually just selling it right now than you do trying to process it. I'm trying to think, the numbers I can't think off my head. Sometimes are like a 10x multiplier. Like it costs 10 times to process what you would make. So I don't know if that made sense, but you just lose a lot more money processing. Now, obviously the hope I think is that processing can then sell those processed items at a much higher market value to the crafters, and then the crafters will ultimately set the final price. But right now that loop is definitely in its infancy, but it feels pretty good. It is a grind though. Again, you're going to have to grind. You have 25 levels in right now. Your certifications go up every 10 levels. So 10 and 20 are when your certifications go up. There's a wide range of things to harvest, which is also kind of nice and variable by region. Initially, there was a quest that we had to do that we needed granite, and granite was super hard to find, and it would frustrate everybody. I mean, you could spend 8 hours looking and maybe find 2. And at the time, there was also a weird bug where things that were gathered or harvested wouldn't disappear. So I could run up to a piece of granite, try to harvest it, actually go through the time, the F time spin, the animation as well, and get nothing. Because it didn't exist. That was even more frustrating when you had spent hours looking. They've really fixed a lot of the spawns at this point. That's not really happening anymore as far as the ghost resources. Also, they've really rebalanced a lot of the sort of initial things that you'll need to get your gathering and your processing and everything else going. Right now, there are a lot of drops in the game, and I think that is largely because the crafting system is just really bare bones, and they have to add something for progression. So there is a lot of dropped items. There are armor sets that give you bonuses, but you also can craft some pretty interesting things as well. And I think that's going to hopefully long term be fun. But again, it is a grind. One of the other questions I wish I had time to ask Steven, I'm really curious what they think will be the average casual player playtime. Do they think a casual player will play for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? Interestingly enough, I had debated this with Diggs recently, and I think there's some research, some literature that suggests a casual person is under 3 hours. But the amount of grind that kind of goes into this will be interesting to see how that ends up. I think you will find that much like how you need to be in a group, in a guild to progress in the PvE, raiding, PvP component, I think you're also going to need a guild to progress in the gathering, processing, and crafting as well. That is, of course, what I look most forward to, but we will see how things end up over time. I mentioned storage. Again, storage being separate leads to some very difficult decisions. I definitely will want to look at whether a Metropolis gives me the bonus of shared storage or not. You have to kind of pick what you run with going to whatever node you're going to. And the world is pretty big. I think that I've played in bigger worlds. I think of Lord of the Rings Online and some other things like that. But, comparison wise, it's pretty big. It's not a ton of time to run from node to node, but it's enough that you're going to have to make some pretty big decisions if you're running with materials, kind of what could you get into trouble-wise along the way. But that's, I think, has been a very good decision. And also will make people think a little bit more about what kind of metropolis they want to live in. So the PTR server, initially I was sort of confused. I thought, what is this about? We're in an alpha. Alpha typically gets brought down, gets patched, brought back up. But they really do intend for the Alpha 2 server to be kind of production persistent, as they say. So PTR has actually been very helpful, I think, in being able to sort of test new builds and actually have sort of turned a corner with that. And we talked about this with Steven yesterday. I think that's going to end up being pretty helpful for everyone. So it's always good. Visually, the game looks really good, really, really good. Depending also how you hit the lighting can look amazing. It really, a lot of people online, I think part of it is some of the just presentations, the things just don't look great on Twitch. And so people think, oh, this game looks terrible. This game looks like crap. It actually looks really good. And when you get in, you'll see that it's pretty nice. So visually, I think the game is in a really, really good place. To wrap up, I think everyone needs to be prepared for Ashes Alpha 2, Phase 1 to be buggy, primarily with servers. I think you're going to see a lot of server issues that we're all just going to have to work through. And I think Intrepid will correct things actually pretty quickly as they move forward. But, we really have to give them a little bit of time to figure this out. They brought in a lot of extra testers, but it is still a big difference between what they've had and then having 100,000, 150,000 people come on board. So I really do think the first several weeks are just going to be strictly server issues that we're trying to get figured out. After that, though, I think we're going to be good. And I do expect people to probably come and go. I don't think this is in a state where you will really see most people stay long term. You will, of course, have hardcore folks. You will have a lot of the content creators stay. But beyond that, I think you're going to see people come and go probably at the time of phases. Of course, I've always said Phase 3 is really the start of Alpha 2, in my opinion. Hopefully that is sort of our shotgun into more permanence. But, right now, I think it's at least in a good enough state. There was a lot of discussion about whether they should lift the NDA or not. I am totally in agreement to lift the NDA. I don't think things are going to be that much different now from a month from now, from 2 months from now. And, ultimately there's going to be people that are unhappy regardless of what you do. And you're really at a point where you just need to get testers in. You need to get a large number of people in so that you can start getting some data. And so I'm actually okay with them leaving or lifting the NDA. I think that was a Band-Aid that just had to be ripped off anyways. So, but yeah, we are on our countdown. We have 4 more days from the time I'm recording this. This might not be posted until Tuesday, which would be what? Yeah, that'd be about 4 more days. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, counting down. And I will see you all. Another thing I will mention, Steven did say you can expect to actually get a download started on Thursday. We don't know exact time yet. We also don't know exact timing of when servers will go live on Friday. However, potentially by the time this gets uploaded, they do plan to have a information dump on server names and when the download can happen and when we'll be able to log in. So that should be coming this week. I'm super excited. This has been something I've been waiting for, getting to play with you all, even if that means dying to you or killing you in this game. I'm incredibly excited to start seeing a lot of you get in with us and really start seeing this game come alive. There's a lot of people saying it's dead on arrival. I don't think so. It has a lot of work. Don't get me wrong. Right now, I would say it has a good foundation. I would say there's nothing that stands out to me right now. but it's in a decent enough spot to start building upon that and really turning nodes and other things up as they can. So I will hopefully see you all on Friday, and I'm going to try to stream a little bit more now that we're getting closer as well. And hopefully this went well. Again, I don't really have a script, so I hopefully didn't have to cut too much out. And I will see you all next time.